Often that's done for the sake of the parents, to see that the parents, oh, you know, the school leader responded, so their school leader cares, but it's not enough. And if it doesn't stop in that school, they need to go beyond the school. They need to go to the administration of the district or further, right? When principals don't respond, and principals are disciplined for not doing their job. Deans, principals, whoever's in ed leadership, they have to do their job. And it is a lot more than conflict resolution, although many of them are not trained. You know, they don't know. In the Peace and Conflict Studies program I founded and ran for years, the number one student I had in there were doctor students who were going into school administration. And they wanted those courses. They wanted to know about how to do conflict transformation and get beyond resolution. And it was fun for me because they would come back and tell me, oh, it worked with my husband. It worked with my teenagers. You know? How do you change your relationship, and how you change how you think about each other and what you do together and how you talk to each other? So, well, thank you for the example. Thank you, Bob. You're welcome. How are we doing? Are we going to make it through the end of this and then take a break? Okay? Okay. So here's the example of femicide that I talked to you about. So this example is, I mean, it's widespread. Femicide goes on even in this part of the world, particularly for young females, but all ages. But this example is from Mexico. And patriarchy, male dominance, is very, very common throughout all of Latin America, all of the Spanish-speaking and former European colonies in Central and South America. Very, very common. And so dominance of the female is very widely accepted, but abuse has its limits. So there are laws against, you know, harming females, but until she's dead, they're often not enforced. Well, so that's femicide. And so these researchers used the data that was out there about not only how many women died and how they died in societies around the schools, but also children's perceptions of this. So they did an intervention with graduate students. They had two groups, and they had one group go out and work with third standard, as you call here, or third graders, as we call in the USA, students, primary school. And they went and interviewed those students and talked to students about relations between the genders and what was in the students' heads. The graduate students did, and they collected data about that. And then they took those students to see a museum about femicide. It had pictures of all these females, all ages, that had been killed right there in their society. That's pretty powerful stuff for children to see. And so, and then the other group of students did the same, and they work with teenagers in the high school, but they just went on their own to see this museum of femicide in Mexico City. And then the educators brought them back to say, now, what are the roots of this? This is a structural conflict. We have a lot of data to say, you know, this is going on and going on and going on, even though it's illegal. What are the roots of this? How is this? Is this in people's thinking? Is this in people's behaviors? So these graduate students examined that over a couple of years. And then they decided to make interventions. So they did two interventions. And one was through storytelling with the younger children. And the children found stories about how these roots happen, how name-calling or mistreating little girls or denying their opportunity, how these things play out, how females are treated differently and given less opportunity, how they don't get to go to school, but their brothers do. And again, this is a part of the world, just like my children are from, where school is not available to everybody. If you don't have the money for the uniforms and the school supplies and a way to get there, you don't go. So the children learned about this, and then they created counter stories of those conditions being different. What if life were like this? So that was a transformation for them to make, just in seeing how people could not have those kind of realities in their lives. And then the high school students created plays, and they did 2 acts. They made 3 plays, and they did 2 acts, and they put the plays on in the theater at the university. And the first one was an illustration of how these conflicts happen, how these behaviors happen. And the second one was a transformation of these behaviors. What would that look like if they were not causing this conflict? If they didn't treat each other differently? If they didn't have these denigrating names for females and so forth? And so they put on these plays. And let me see if I can get open here. Again, I'm new at using this computer. Another file that is part of their work. Here we go, chapter 6. So this is by Lucia McKinnon, Rodriguez McKinnon. Mouse is not scrolling down. Maybe I can scroll up. And Nayade Monter Arizmendi. And so this is their chapter that they put in my book, and this is this book right here. Oh, it's not showing again. I'm sorry, I'm still learning how to do this in your... Thank you for helping. It's open, but I don't know how to get your projector to find it. Anyway, I'll just continue. So ultimately what they do in the chapter is they made a poster, if you will, at the end of the chapter with ways that teachers or educators at any level can, we're having display problems, so just listen and we'll forget the display, how they can do these things in class to avoid this gender discrimination that leads eventually to femicide. And if you want to come up on the break and look at their chapter, it's right here in the book. But some of the ways that they put in their poster, were looking at the curriculum. How are females presented in the curriculum? How much? Always less, right? So what does that mean for you as an educator? Did we get a display? Oh, we got it, thank you. So how much are they represented in the curriculum? I've already told you about most of this, so I'm just going to scroll down to their image. If it, oh, I don't even know if it shows here. So how are females represented in the curriculum? What are the reference we use for females? What do we call them? And how respectful are they compared to what we call the males? And how equal are the groups who are working together in the course? So so this is, again, I've already pretty much described it to you. So I won't, but this is about how they put on the stories and how they put on the plays. And I may have some images here on my desk if I can find them. No. I'll try to find them on the break and put them up. So when we take a break, you can see them if you want, of the plays that they did. So they had these strategies. So one was making sure that the groups were balanced, and when the groups are working together in school, and that you don't have just all males over here and females over here, and as much as possible, you balance them as they interact in school. I know still in school, and again from reading research, that expectations for female performance in particularly science and math are still very, very low, female teacher and male teacher, very low. And we know that just even from just observing how do they physically interact with females versus males in the class? What kind of message does that send to them? Like one example I remember from actually one of my graduate students that was watching this too, is that the teacher kept coming up and said, "Can I help you?" to the females. Like, "Oh, you probably wouldn't understand this. So can I help you?" Never did it to a male, right? Or the male's going to be in charge of doing the experiment, but the female's going to write it up. That happened to me all through college. Every science class I had. Oh, the male's going to take over manipulating the equipment, and I'm supposed to be the secretary. Write it up, right? Always. And professors wanted that too. So just like, how balanced is this? And in the curriculum, how many female scientists are represented in the curriculum? And you know, most of the inventors in the world have been females, but they couldn't get the copyright, they couldn't get the royalty, they weren't allowed to have the female name on there, so they had to put a male name as the founder of that intervention. But if you look at her history, it's a female that invented a lot of these things, especially domestic tools, because this is what they needed to run the household. So they invented things. They're quite the engineers, but they didn't get credit because males only could have royalties and copyrights. Okay, so lots of things to do in education. So here's your practice. Okay, this is where you're going to get to work now. So I want you to think of another type of conflict, in fact, two of them. Question? Just, thank you.
Ma'am, regarding the topic of femicide, most of the society in the world are mainly patriarchal societies. So even in the Indian society also, most of the cultures, they are patriarchal, although there are some which are patriarchal. So regarding that, especially regarding both male and female child, regarding the birth of a child, whether the child is a male or a female. Usually in most societies, males are more preferred, according to research. So, but in science, we all know that males have XY chromosomes, females have double X chromosomes. So it is clear from science that the sex is determined by the chromosomes from the male side, not from the female side, because females have both X. But in recent times, people are more educated, and many of us are aware of the fact regarding that. But still, regarding infertility issues also, females are still targeted in most cases. So my question is that regarding this, how can this be tackled in not only as a resolution, but as a transformation? That's my question.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so you want to add to that?
Yeah, I actually want to add to that because I've been thinking about that as well, the question, and also some of the things that have been said. And I wanted to give some sort of like a local context here because I don't know if you know much about like the Mizo society and the culture that we practice here. So when it comes to a male or a female child, we do have this customary law wherein if you are a girl and married to a non-Mizo, a tribe, I mean, like you can't have the female's tribe, the status. So this, you know, goes on to like status and you know all this kind of anything. Anyway, so so if you're a male and you're married to a non-Mizo girl, then the child takes over your name, like. So that's also the case here, and we do have a lot of like local things going on as well. So yeah, I mean like in terms of the customary laws, how it's being practiced here, a lot of the laws that's being practiced here is very, very patriarchal. Yeah, I mean, just want to add to that.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. So the effects of patriarchy on genders and society. I'm really lacking knowledge about her history here. Were you patriarchal before European colonization? You were not matriarchal. You were patriarchal before. Okay. In the Americas, all of the Americas, north to south, it was matriarchal. And that's why people who retain their Latin identity through most of the Americas, except in USA, unless they've migrated there, for the most part, have several last names because they keep the mother's name and they keep the father's name. In fact, they use the mother's name socially instead of the father's name. They don't give you all their last names. They use their name and their mother's family's name. Even though they've been absorbed into a patriarchal society, they honor, and this is for generations back. But still, patriarchy is pushed. So to respond to your questions, yes, these are structural problems that are playing out in cultural rules, right? Like what can be passed on and who gets what as far as an identity and who can do what, marriage laws. I'm from California, USA, and just, in her history there, it was just right before I was born in the last century that if you had an indigenous identity, you couldn't have anything. You couldn't have property. You couldn't marry outside your culture. Legally, you couldn't. You just didn't have any rights. And we're still working on that. I mean, we're still working on rights for all kinds of people, and I won't go into that whole conflict, but it's structural and it's cultural. And so these rules are from your heritage, and they're there for a reason, and I don't know what the reasons were from your heritage, why. But if you had a patriarchal heritage, then I think like much of the world that became patriarchal, it was from beliefs of spirituality and protection, and often which is really hard when you listen to yourself in a negative way of thinking about anybody or yourself. It's really hard to turn off it. You have to make the commitment to do it and turn off that negative voice and change your perspective. I loved when I was working in Northern Ireland, where the two groups were in the 1970s, they call what the Troubles, and they look exactly like these two groups, but they're attacking and killing each other like crazy for power. And not to oversimplify the conflict, but it was basically a power struggle, and it still is, hasn't been resolved. But the peace educators came in and tried to get the children from the different groups to work together, and they gave them sunglasses with rose lenses. And they said, see, when you change your view of the world, everybody looks like roses. And that's what they are. Stop seeing each other by these different identities and just change your perspective. So this is a lot of work, but it's possible. Look how far we've come as humanity already. Look at all the things that we've said, no, you can't do that. For human rights or other laws, no, we have our ethics. So you have to look at, okay, how has your cultural tradition and modern ethics and modern beliefs and legal systems work together? Okay? You have to do that, and you can't do it by yourself. So forming organizations, joining organizations, getting together just as a powerful group of students. In many of my classes, I have students come up to me and say, okay, we're going to get to work on this. We students right here, we're going to work on this. Can we make this our research topic? Absolutely. Let me help you find some resources. Okay, so thank you for the question. I don't have a solution, but I did analyze in the sense that this is a structural conflict, and the whole structure needs to be identified as the problem. And so maybe the rules need to change. And I don't know if those rules are written or they're just followed because they're tradition. But we know how to break traditions, and we're breaking them in many ways all the time. So maybe that's one we just need to break. All right, what I want you to do, and I don't want you to do this alone, because it just takes more thinking. Resolving and transforming conflict is better when you work with other people at whatever level. I want you to work with at least one. I want you to get in groups of 4. Little groups of 4. You're not glued to your chair, so you can move around. I think your chairs can even move around. They don't look like they're nailed down. And get in groups of 4 and find at least 2 conflicts and work on, here's a resolution response and here's a transformation response. Just come up with some ideas together and write it down. You have blank paper, I see, was passed out. But everybody needs a copy, okay? Now, should we take a break first? You've been sitting a long time. Do we have a question? We do. Hold on.
I don't know whether it's within the context, but since it is related to the topic, I think it's okay to ask.
Sure.
Because my question will be on American and rights. Because as for me, when I say or when I think about rights, what comes into my mind is American. And before I ask the question, I just want to clarify my question, because I hope you won't take it in negative or the wrong way. Because in today's world, I think it's very, very easy to become a villain to others when we know too much about our rights without a proper moral ethics. Because everything is one click away, even from whatever happens in the end zone of the world is one click away, even from the one of the smallest state of India, Mizoram. So I want to add that America has always been looked up to by the rest of the world in certain aspects, let's say. So do the Americans, and whatever is practiced in America, it's gradually been practiced by the other countries and inculcated in their culture. So ma'am, as you being the chairman of International Peace Researchers Association, if I'm not mistaken, and you yourself being American, I'm just curious to know your honest opinion on Americans and their rights in general, for my perspectives of, and I don't know about the others, on Americans based regarding their rights. So my question is, do you think that Americans have used their rights as it should be in the maximum positive way? Or do you think that Americans have misused their rights?
Okay, thank you. What do you think I'm going to say? You can predict my answer, can't you? Okay. Of course we've abused our rights. I mean, and now when you say Americans, are you talking about our president? Are you talking about all of the migrants in our country who are not citizens, but they're so important in our society and who bring their cultures and their ideas and their habits with them? So what do you mean by an American, right? I remember when I was, not to get too off topic, but just as analogous here. when I was collecting stories from around the world about how people made peace, I did a chicken soup book and it ended up calling Chicken Soup for Stories for a Better World, but its working title was Chicken Soup for the Peace Lover's Soul. And I spent 6 years going around talking to Nobel Prize winners and presidents and the unsheltered people on the street, everybody I could find that would talk to me, and I recorded their stories, and some of them wrote their stories. And I remember when Oscar Arias Sanchez, now he calls himself Oscar Arias because Arias is his mother's side of the family, right? And this is Costa Rica. So matriarchy, an honoring mom. So he calls himself Oscar Arias, but he's Oscar Arias Sanchez. And I met him, and I said, you know, Oscar, would you please write for my book? Because, you know, you got the Nobel Prize for negotiating a peace agreement in Central America, which is just astounding. Would you write a book? Would you write the story for me, how you did that? And he said, okay, I'll do that, and give me 6 months. So he wrote the story in less than 6 months, sent it to me, and I rejected it. Because he said, you know, Americans. I said, wait a minute, Oscar, You're talking about the government at that time. You're not talking about the people, all right? Well, my government was over here involved in interventions with military. I was at the federal building marching with candles to say, stop it. Get out of there. Put your guns down. All right, so which American are you talking about? Because when you generalize, when you use a title for a group of people, you know, that really is denying the individuals and the particular people who have all different kinds of realities, recognition. And so I say, you're going to have to change a chapter, right? You're going to have to change it, the story, because I can't publish it. It doesn't work for me. So he did. And he said, thank you. Thank you for helping me learn not to generalize like that about one group of people or one country. And it's in our discourse, it's our habit. Oh, all Indians. Well, yesterday when I did my opening talk, I had actually written up a speech, but it was on the computer and somebody took the computer away. Oh, you can't have that up here. So I'm like, okay, what was I going to say? And I just ad-libbed, but I had quite a bit about the Mizo people, and thank you for having me here on your land. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to learn from you here. And quite a bit about that, but I just forgot. I was so caught off guard, I forgot to put it in, so I apologize that I didn't get it. So anyway, thank you. So I'm not going to call you all Indians and say, you know, Indians are all like this. So when I respond for America, and then there are 3 Americas as we go geographically, North, Central, and South America, and I think you mean people from USA. Whatever you mean by that, of course we cause trouble. And no, we don't have all the solutions. But we are not all the same people. You know, some of us are doing this and some of us are doing that. And fortunately, most of the time, our freedom of speech is protected. So most of the time, we can go out there and say, hey, President, you didn't address, you know, this right, and you need to do that. We can speak up and not be put in jail most of the time. When the government or the military decides that we're a threat or decides to give us a label that we're a threat, no, we can't. And they'll come up with something and lock us up or quiet us down. And I know that's going on here too. So, yes, people from my country, my home country, USA, are causing problems. And I don't remember if my next presentation I bring up, I think I do refer to it as colonization and decolonization. And so I think recolonization, even though India is independent from Britain now, is happening a lot. And I think my country is contributing to that quite a bit through sponsoring global corporations, which, you know, are harming what we call neoliberalism, running the world in an economic paradigm of development. Oh, you know, you're not valuable country unless you're developing economically. Because if you don't have a good economy, then, you know, what are you worth to the global, what are you worth to the world? You got to have money. You got to have industry. That's the most important thing. And then we have these rules, sustainable development rules. You have to sustain your economy. You have to sustain your economic game participation, or you're not a very good country. Well, unfortunately, a lot of those companies started in USA and are thriving through the USA, and the NGOs that we have, the non-governmental organizations, are often working with those companies because those companies give the NGOs money to say, okay, you know, we're getting resources out of this area over here, so you go over and give some aid to the people because they're hungry. Well, that's a structural problem. What, are you going to go feed the hungry instead of change the system of letting them have jobs and supporting themselves? So anyway, I don't want to be generalized about, and I don't think you do either, even just calling you the Mizo peoples. I know you all have your own identities and your own interests and stories. But yes, I definitely admit that my home country has caused a bit of conflict and needs a lot of work. Did I address your question? Okay, all right, thank you. All right, so I don't have a clock. I don't know what time it is. It's not showing here. What time is it, please? 12? 12:18? Oh, okay, 12:20. So I think we need a break. So tell you what, let's take a break. I don't know if they're giving you anything to drink or eat today. I apologize if they're not. And find your 4, okay? And come back in your groups of 4 in, say, 10 minutes, and show me your groups of 4, and you know me, I'm going to be wandering around. And I want you to come up with your 2 conflicts, examples of resolution and transformation. If they're in education, that'd be great, but they don't have to be, okay? All right, bye. Go take your break.